Laura Fryer made a video on reclaiming the soul of game dev. She titled it The Power of Friction. I think it's going to be a really good one. Looking forward to it. Let's dive in.
Our future was being decided behind closed doors, and we knew it. It was February of 2000. I was just months away from finishing up Crimson Skies, and the Xbox was still a high-stakes gamble that a lot of people at Microsoft wanted to kill.
Robbie tries to talk to Bill, and Bill yells at Robbie.
If I'd had glasses on, I would have needed windshield wipers on him because he was spitting at us so hard and so fast.
Bill would yell at us for a while about these different things, and then Ballmer would take over on the business case, and the business case looked terrible.
By now, and the reason it's called the Valentine's Day Massacre is because all Valentine's Day activities are now off.
I wasn't in the room for the Valentine's Day Massacre meeting, but our team knew that everything was on the line. When Ed and Robbie walked out, they hadn't just saved the project. They had defined the Xbox culture. And in the years ahead, I saw what that meeting actually created. We became a team that argued passionately about everything. The controller, the games, the tools. To an outsider, it probably looked like we were at war with each other. But I knew the truth. We were fighting for the right reasons. We could push each other that hard because we all shared the same vision.
I love this. There's something that has emerged, this idea of like psychological safety perhaps, or safe spaces. And I'm not saying those things don't matter, but I am saying those things often get misinterpreted. And so she's calling out this idea that people were willing to argue for what they believed. And I have been in rooms where people argued because they didn't want the wrong thing to reach the players. And even though those arguments are fierce, they are with the right intentions. And yes, sometimes there are the usual actors disagreeing with each other, and you took this side that you always take, and you took this side that you always take. The point is that we're being honest about how we feel we can get to the right end state. And in that, so much value can happen. And I think we're so worried about that going too far nowadays. Because like psychological safety is an important thing, and you can't actually have these arguments if there isn't psychological safety. But misinterpreted psychological safety becomes the weaponization of the inability to do these things. Of like, well, you can't, it got tense in that room, we can't have that. And I'll probably go into this, she'll probably go into this more in greater depth, because I want to talk about some things about this, but I just want to call out like that idea of we can get into a room and have a heated disagreement and it's okay. And I think you do need that if you're trying to do something meaningful and creative. And I think so many of the best games and movies and whatever else, the collaborative human endeavors towards creativity, so many times there's stories of these sorts of arguments that she's describing. So anyway, love where she's starting with this.
We weren't wrestling each other. We were wrestling the ideas.
I'm a game director now, and I'm co-directing with Leonard Borarsky, and that's how we work.
But today, that heat has been replaced. The recent layoffs at Xbox show what happens when that friction ends. The soul fades because that intense discussion, that push and pull, is exactly what makes great things. So I have to ask, where did it go? And more importantly, how do we get it back?
So that was the first time I learned that, people can really be anti-passion in this industry.
You know the story of those early games, a small group of friends tinkering together in a basement or a cramped dorm room or some cheap office. They're surrounded by monitors and old pizza boxes. They have nothing but their passion and a burning desire to create.
We occupied the second floor, so we got broken into a couple times.
There was that crack house behind the building.
I was employee number 5. We were in one room, a room and a half. Everybody did everything.
In these teams, everyone's a maker. There are no layers of management or HR trainings every week. There are just people wearing different hats and trying to fill in the gaps because they have to.
I do a lot of the art, animation, level design, all that kind of stuff. And we basically just share all the tasks to make games like this.
I'm Matt Griffin. I'm the PR marketing director and also lead tester, voice actor, just basically anything that keeps them focused on the game. I'm gonna handle it.
The goal wasn't a fancy.
I love this too, because what binds these small groups together, and what is actually assisted by the fact that they are small groups in a small space, is the shared goal, the shared vision of what the game should be. And I also love they talk to this PR guy, because like I'm also the lead tester, voice actor. I do whatever I can, because I think sometimes people go like, oh, there's no room for somebody without some sort of like deep game devy hard skill in those environments. And I think there is, and actually often there's someone like that present, and it's actually that they're doing a bunch of stuff. They're figuring out the things, because when you have so few people, there's going to be things that emerge that nobody knows how to do. We have a company now. We have to figure out a bunch of random stuff. Can I be the person who goes, I don't know. Depending on your structure, you can't all do this, but who's going to go solve taxes? And we need to go find an attorney. Is there anybody we should talk to? Does anybody know? I don't know. I'll run it down, right? Give me some names of people. Does anybody know anybody in this space? And just being willing to go do that stuff and jump in and do whatever you need to do. I've discovered this since doing what I do now, where I have some help and some support from people, but I have to create a bunch of different things, and a bunch of it I was never trained to create, and you just have to figure it out. And they were doing this in the context of games all together, all focused on the same thing. With whatever came up, somebody had to do it. And he even said this just the shared tasks that we all have. So cool. It's really cool.
Anything that keeps them focused on the game, I'm gonna handle it.
The goal wasn't a fancy corporate headquarters or some award at a conference. The goal was simply to make something that mattered, to change the world.
Jason said it best.
I want to potentially do a video about this at some point, too. I keep alluding to this. The fancy corporate headquarters and the award, I think, actually often create problems. And that idea of we just wanted to build something that mattered. It was never about a big studio space. I wonder, because I've seen it at multiple organizations where when they get the awards or they get the big studio space, something shifts in the culture underlying it. And we lose 'cause instead of that drive, not to prove ourselves, but to make something that matters, that almost becomes, we've made it. We're really good. And the other thing that's present and true when you have those small groups of people all moving towards the game, trusting each other and trying to figure out how to solve the problems collectively, I'm not saying there's not egos there, but arrogance is a toxic variable in that space. And when you start believing you've made it, you start believing you're the best game devs, you start whatever it is, ego and arrogance can creep in and can start causing you to interact with your work differently and to hold yourself in too high esteem that you never would have if it was unproven and you were 5 to 10 people in a barely afforded small office space trying to solve complex problems.
The goal was simply to make something that mattered, to change the world.
Jason said it best, I think. He said that Microsoft is building the biggest cannon in the world, and they're pointing it right at Sony, and we can be the bullet in that cannon, and we can make a really big impact on the course of the game industry.
The mission was simple. We like the tech, we like games, and we like each other.
In a workplace
that was something like when I used to get together with my friends in junior high school and high school to play Dungeons and Dragons. We just all waited for the weekend to roll around so we could play games, and then we played games all weekend and lived off of almond joy bars and Cheetos, and you couldn't tear us away from playing games. And that's the kind of environment I wanted to create.
We're going to make something cool. And while they're still figuring out exactly what that game is, it's the team vision that carries them through those passionate debates.
We had the advantage.
I think I'm gonna pick on this facilities thing again, because they were just showed people, playing the arcade and playing on the ping pong table. And obviously when things are really hard and it's like everybody's working really hard, you don't see as much of that, except in those really small teams where you almost might see more of it because everybody's spending more time there. And this is where I'm going to be honest, there are some lives that aren't necessarily as compatible with this, or it's harder to fit in and to feel as much a part. And like there's trade-offs there, right? There's pros and cons. Like people can burn themselves out. They can overdo it. They can, red line and burn the candle at both ends or whatever you want to call it. But what was interesting is often the big places, they almost always had that sort of place. Like, oh, we've got the ping pong table, or we've got this, or we got that. And I would almost never see anybody there. And I think it was like, oh yeah, look, we still have these things, but it's almost like we don't know each other like that anymore. And I don't know, it's trade-offs, right? There is a thing that like scale can provide you, but there's also a win condition that comes out of small teams sharing a goal, debating and arguing with each other, sharing work, being friends, respecting each other, and moving towards shipping something. And by the way, it's no guarantee. Plenty of teams that do something like that still fail. Yeah, it's a different feel to it, though. It's a different feel to it.
What that game is, it's the team vision that carries them through those passionate debates.
We had the advantage 20 years ago of being really stupid. I mean, being really young, but that young is stupid.
That's pretty cool.
In that mindset, like anything is possible. So you just get started and then you figure out what's hard on the way.
This is what I think of the Computer Game Developers Conference.
Even the Game Developers Conference started with that same soul, the drive to share, to learn, and to figure out what games could become. Chris Crawford, who literally wrote the book on Atari development, started GDC in his living room.
We were sharing stories with each other. So it was very, around the campfire kind of idea. That's really all we talked about that first weekend was common problems, common solutions.
But years later, Chris gave his famous dragon speech. He told a room full of developers that the industry was losing its soul, that we were becoming too corporate, too safe, and we'd forgotten why we fell in love with this in the first place. He ended the speech by literally charging out of the room to go chase the dragon of artistic greatness. That speech hit hard because it came from the man who started it all in his living room. He saw the heat being traded for polish and safety decades ago. We adopted that same defiant spirit in the Xbox ATG team. Our mission was simple: help developers make their games great on Xbox by making the tech get out of the way of the art.
They were saying, we're going to fix this. So more of the money is going on the screen, not just trying to figure out the convoluted hardware. And that was like, really? I mean, it was like oxygen.
And we didn't just hire engineers. We had artists, we had audio people, we had designers. We had a team of game makers to support the game makers. And that shared vision was the soul of our team. It was the foundation that allowed us to wrestle with ideas. But
I like this call out too, because I think we can sometimes reject the idea that this can exist at scale. And here, in the context of a Microsoft and a large Xbox organization, you have a team that held to that focus of like, we have a shared mission and we're trying to help do it. And as much as I've kind of talked in this video about, the downside of the potential, the trade-offs of the big corporate headquarters or whatever else, and there are pockets one of the interesting things is that like the the giant organizations are not monocultural. And I have operated on teams within broader structures that had a very different feel to them while still being part of that broader structure. And so, maybe that's the trap. Maybe that's the hard part is it's when it's 5 people in the basement, you've got a bunch of constraints that are going to make things very challenging and difficult. You have a different set of constraints when you're part of a large organization, but perhaps the reality is that no matter where you are, there's always going to be something that's going to be making this really hard. And the question will be, are you going to hold to that willingness to shoot for the idea, to run for what matters, to share the goal and have the disagreement and still respect each other and still have a good professional working relationship, be friends with the people that you're friends with, but also be willing to work with the people that maybe you're not as friends with, because it is a larger structure. And that's okay. You don't have to be friends with everybody, but we do need to get to the same outcome, right? There's a place we're trying to go. And we're all here and we know we're all trying to do that together. It's a really cool feeling.
Being aligned doesn't mean being quiet.
That my passion in having these meetings can be off-putting.
Great people have friction and lots of it. And this is where it gets really interesting. You see, the friction of creatives pushing against each other is where the magic is made. But that can't happen without trust. It requires people to forget themselves and play in the space of the game, in the space of the ideas, rather than the space of their egos. When you watch a great team debating a feature, it can look intense. To an outsider, it might even feel like they're angry.
Do you feel like it's pretty close to functioning the way you guys want it to be, or not? No, how much?
If you think the AI sucks, say the AI sucks. I mean, don't ask me how I feel about the AI.
But they aren't wrestling each other. They're wrestling the idea. And in that effort to find the solution, they forget themselves. They aren't in the room anymore. They're in the game. It's almost as if they are the game wrestling to become real. It's not personal. It's passion. Epic.
Does this sound familiar? You're in a leadership role at a game studio. Everyone is busy working. No one has any time. But the game, the actual game itself, isn't in a good spot. Maybe it's the tech. Maybe it's the lack of a validated prototype. Maybe it's that every person seems to have a different idea about what we're trying to build. But you've got a job. There are reports to send, meetings to schedule and facilitate, the occasional season of performance reviews to go through. And everyone is always so busy. When you step back, it makes you wonder if everyone is just going to keep slowly walking towards the abyss until the project or game fails. Is this what it means to be a leader in games? In tech? To endlessly repeat the same sequence of meetings without really moving the needle? To spend hours trying to get Jira tickets and dashboards where they should be? To pretend that everything is fine when you know deep down it really isn't? It doesn't have to be this way. You can make a difference. You can help your team and game succeed, but sometimes you need a bit of help to get there. I've started a game dev leadership accelerator. It aims to level up leaders who see opportunities to make a difference but don't know how to capitalize on them. We'll walk through what it means to lead well and give you tools to understand your organization's challenges and implement changes to overcome them. Game dev is hard. Knowing how to lead will give you an edge. It will still be hard, but you'll be ready to tackle it. If you're interested, let me know below. Hit the link. I hope to see you in the accelerator because I believe better leaders will help teams make better games, and I look forward to someday playing what you create. I think I love how she just distinguished that idea of the idea versus the ego. And one of the challenges, when you think you're really good, your ideas get wrapped up in your ego. And so you can have the same debate, what seems like the same debate on the surface, but underneath it, some people are becoming very hurt because they've wrapped up their ego in the ideas that they're putting forward. And it starts creating like factions and cliques and politics about like who likes who and who agreed with who, and versus we recognize we're all here to talk about the idea and to argue about the idea and try to make sure the idea is as good as it can be given all the constraints that we have, because we want this to be good. We want this to be this. We want this to matter, as you said. We want this to be something meaningful that players love and enjoy and play. And yeah, your ego will get in the way, becoming ego invested. And it's so hard because we are ego invested in work. Like we spend a bunch of time doing something, we care about it. To have somebody come in and can feel like sideswipe us, like, oh, I just did this thing that I thought was really good, and then someone comes in and they give us a bunch of critical feedback. Like, that can be really difficult to absorb, especially if you're not used to it. And this is where, like, we need to create cultures that are used to this, that are willing to do it, where we train people. Everybody talks about training people to give feedback so it, like, isn't offensive. And yeah, there's value in learning how to give feedback well. You know what's also really valuable? Being able to take feedback well, even if it's not given well. You know, like, I know I'm in trouble if I give feedback and the other person starts critiquing how I gave them feedback. I'm like, uh-oh. We're thinking about the wrong thing. There's a right time for that too. But like, we're thinking about the wrong thing if it's like, hey, my objection to the way you gave me feedback, or what the feedback you gave me was that you didn't give me feedback the right way. I'm like, oh boy. Like we're, and that can be really tough. But again, you're wrestling with the idea. If you're all wrestling with the idea together, that thing that she described is possible, which is like we're almost the collective brain of the game trying to manifest itself. And that's our job, is to figure out how to manifest the best possible game.
To become real. It's not personal. It's passion.
Epic delivered, Epic over-delivered. They did a great job for E3. And I think that creative difference, that conflict, is the way you get a better game.
And this is why smaller teams often find more success. They have the trust to let the social noise fall away so the game can take center stage. In those rooms, nobody's offended if voices get raised or people get interrupted, because everyone knows you're not fighting each other. You're fighting for the best version of the game.
It was Leonard and I in our office, and I talked about it, and it wasn't us arguing. It was just us talking and on the whiteboard and going over things. And, you know, to the people at Obsidian, a lot of them thought we were arguing. And if you actually would listen to what we were talking about, we were trying to figure out if an idea would work.
And that's the soul I'm talking about. Games aren't just the code or the art. It's the relationships, the shared belief, the willingness to fight for an idea in service to something greater. And when that trust exists, that's when you get the magic. Because you don't just get games that work. They feel like they have a heartbeat, a soul.
It's no wonder that the game feels the way that it does, which is like, that's a fantastic thing, honestly.
And to be honest, like for us, it was even a surprise to see how appreciated it is, because like sometimes we feel like we went too far, but no, like it works well for people, and like we are super glad about it, because yeah, it's like really like the game is pretty much the studio soul put into video game form, where we don't like to take ourselves too seriously, but also we want to like touch on some very deep and personal themes. So like we are super happy to see how much it connected with players, and I think it's a testament that people want to feel the soul of a game when they play it.
Yeah,
they built a masterpiece.
So, one, Pirate Software appearance, didn't expect that. Two, this what Tim Cain said there. We weren't arguing. If you were to hear, like, people outside looking in might have thought we were arguing. We weren't arguing. This is one of the issues. What is the difference between a passionate exchange of ideas, a healthy debate, an ongoing heated discussion, even a really excited yes and session but where there's a lot of interruption, and like an argument in a negative sense of that? Because there is argument in the negative sense. There is debate and disagreement that is non-productive, not healthy. Again, often when egos get too involved, not always, but often when egos get too involved. And one of the problems that can happen, and I've seen leaders do this, you're facilitating, you're a producer or you're an art lead or you're somebody, and you're facilitating the room, and things start getting, like, the temperature starts coming up, tension starts happening. And if you don't know, if you're not paying enough attention or you're not comfortable in that environment, you can immediately jump in and I need to resolve the tension. Hey, it seems like things are getting heated. Let's cool it down. Hang on, let's take a few minutes. It's like, no, let's not. Let's not take a few minutes. This is the right conversation. We need to have it now. And it's okay that there's emotion in the room. We are going to have a healthy debate. We are going to have a meaningful discussion. And yes, we're going to be interrupting each other. And from an outside lens, it might not look like harmony. It's one of the dangerous things, actually, is that so many leaders and producers are oriented towards the idea of harmony in what they do. Like, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to keep everybody happy and morale up. It's like, yeah. Actually, those aren't the primary goal. The primary goal is for you to help the team be effective at delivering something meaningful. And by the way, one of the best ways to do that is to have a happy team that feels meaning in what they do and has high morale. So, like, that's good. But, like, if you misinterpret that as everybody is positive all the time, or you misinterpret that as everybody is, like, in harmony, or we don't have debates, you're missing something. And I've seen people jump in, and so it's not, this isn't something that necessarily comes from like on high down into structure or anything like that, although it can often be a misguided leader who shuts down conversations that they find uncomfortable and that they don't feel like they know how to facilitate. And that then becomes the culture. Once you shut down enough of those conversations, people will have to have them somewhere else. And I wonder if I've done that at points in my career. I wouldn't be surprised if I have, like, jumped in too early. I know I've seen others do it. I tend to be a little bit more hands-off, so maybe my bias towards passivity in some of those rooms has left. I've got other cons to that, but like maybe one of the pros is I am okay with the debate and the argument, kind of as it unfolds and sort of standing in the storm, as it were, of the facilitator role. But like that's where you need to be comfortable being sometimes. And if the leaders don't allow that stuff to happen, people will stop having it publicly or stop having it at all, and both are bad. Because again, we throw out the baby with the bathwater when any conversation in which it seems like people are massively disagreeing is not allowed. We're like, oh, sorry, hey, it was getting too heated. Whoa, let's take it down. And people jump in right when the real conversation needs to happen. They'll jump in and they'll stop it. Something to be aware of if you're a leader or producer or whatever, any kind of that, any role in that space.
Yeah, the soul of a game when they play it.
Yeah. They built a masterpiece that carries their team's soul. You can feel the high trust, the real alignment, and everyone having skin in the game.
A group of friends with a shared vision and the drive to make something great.
And let's be honest, that is a terrifying way to work. It means if the game fails, you go down with the ship. There's no corporate safety net to catch you. No next project already lined up by the parent company. That pressure is immense. But for Sandfall, it was a catalyst. Some of them had never worked on a project this size before. Some hadn't worked on a game. But they brought that raw passion with them. And they built a team that had space to discuss ideas passionately because they were all pulling towards the same dream and because they had to get it right. Or look at Team Cherry.
I also want to call out, too, a lot of times people will describe these as this was a group of friends. I've heard that a lot. But it wasn't like they were all pre-existing friends. In the story of Sandfall Interactive, some people they found elsewhere and then brought them in, and they became friends. And what did that mean? It means, we were able to come together, stand side by side, and work on this thing, and we enjoyed that. We enjoyed doing that together. I also think your call out of the fear of if this doesn't work, if this really doesn't work, and we might have all just wasted some number of years and dollars of our lives on, a giant, I guess, personal learning journey that didn't really amount to much else. And that can be that threat means that when you see someone do something that doesn't make sense, you almost feel obligated to say something because you're not just advocating for the player. In some sense, like, my livelihood is on the line. Hey, if we ship a really bad game because I didn't speak up when I should have, I'm the one that's out of a job. I'm the one who's, I don't know, parents are going to be disappointed in me, whatever. Like, I'm the one who's going to have to go find something else to do because this didn't work out. And when the stakes are higher, I don't know. You ever watch someone who's in the military be around someone else who is not that familiar with firearms, and they have firearms, and like, I was in the military, I'm aware of where the barrels are all pointing in a way that a lot of people might not be, and we're trained around that to be very aware of where all the barrels are pointing at all times. And you flag me with a weapon, and I'm going to correct you, and if you don't listen, I will leave. And it is not okay. I don't care if the weapon's empty and everybody's checked the mag 7 times. I don't care. You don't flag me with weapons. And why? The stakes are really high. If we got this wrong, it might die. Or I might shoot somebody. If I'm the one with a weapon, you better believe that weapon's pointing in a safe direction pretty much all the time. And we have a very high bar there because the stakes are very high. And so anyway, just another version of this. When the stakes are really high, you speak up. You say that's dumb. You say this isn't what it should be. You talk about the stuff that matters. And you don't always figure out how to say it perfectly so you don't bother any senior leader. Because, what does it matter if I bother a senior leader and get fired if the ship's going down anyway? Cool. I guess you'll fire me, and then you guys can all go back to rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic because you're not willing to have any real conversations. That happens. And so are you willing to jump in if high stakes help? High stakes are also high stakes, and they have their downsides. It is like, hey, if this doesn't work well, the skin in the game means it's pretty disruptive to a lot of our lives. And a lot of those fail, and they do experience the negative consequence of that. I think there's still more gained from the experience if you had the right attitude about it from the learning perspective. But yeah. So anyway, yeah.
Dream. And because they had to get it right. Or look at Team Cherry, the makers of Silksong. After their huge success, they didn't hire a massive team or move into a fancy office. They stayed small, independent, and true to what made them special. Silksong took longer, but they didn't cave to that pressure. They just wanted to make something great together, and they did. Fans sometimes grumbled about the wait, but they showed up because the game reflected their brilliance once again. It proved that protecting the process is worth the time. So how do we reclaim that soul? Well, we build teams that trust one another, and then we protect them.
This is just how I am. If you want to make games with me, this is how I am. I get really excited about things. When I'm excited about something you design, you're going to love it. When I'm excited about something I've designed and you want something else, you're going to hate it.
We make sure that everyone on the team has skin in the game. That means more makers and a lot less managers. Teams where everyone pitches in when needed. And we have to stop being afraid of healthy friction. It's okay to disagree as long as there's enough trust that everyone can commit once the decision is made.
If I like this too, because she says this as someone who has been for most of her career. You could say well, she's a career manager, right? Like, you look at her production credits and her experiences, and it's in production roles and it's doing high level leadership things. And yet she can still call out hey, if you have a team I've seen this too, very recently, that's just overstuffed with managers. There was a team that was almost half of everybody, and it was a startup. It was, a well-funded startup. It was a startup, and almost half the team was non-contributing people. And I was this isn't a good idea, right? You have 4 layers of leadership, and you're a startup trying to make your first game. This isn't good. This is you're not set up right. You overbuilt the wrong parts of your organization too quick, and it's going to slow you in getting to a game if you ever get there. And that's kind of what ended up happening. But she's calling this out as like you need people who do care deeply. And I think the other thing that I want to emphasize, trust and relationships are so important if you really want to move quickly. Special forces teams aren't perfect in any way. One of the things that they need to have is when they go out on the mission, they need to have sufficient trust in each other and they do, by and large, that when something goes wrong, this person is going to do the right thing, not the wrong thing, that is in our best interest to include me. And that, like, when I say cover me and start moving, or when they establish, say go, that like they're not gonna get distracted. They're not gonna not hit their shot. They're not gonna, whatever it is. Sort of come back to the more military analogies, but there's this idea of like underneath that is a deep trust. And you don't need to go up to special forces to see that, by the way, in the context of militaries. There are that in like regular sort of combat units across many militaries around the world, where you just have that deep understanding that has developed somewhat over time, but also has respect for the other person's expertise, and that you're in this together, and that they believe that you will show up, that you will not back down. And I think that's something too of like, I'm not going to back down when this gets hard. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to help overcome. I'm going to be with you together overcoming this, because I value us and the success of what we're trying to do in some ways more than I value me. And I think that, like, when groups of people come together to do really meaningful things, often that is an underlying thing that they didn't put themselves first, because they should have done something else if they were going to put themselves first. And if you live in a society, or you live in a group or an environment or whatever, where everybody's like teaching you to be really selfish all the time, and you can be trained that way inside of certain corporate environments, I think it diminishes the chance of a group coming together, having the trust, having the relationships to come together and succeed at something in that amazing way, because everybody's going to at some level be going like, oh, what's in this for me, right? Like, how does this work out in my behalf? How does this make my CV look better, or whatever it is? And that messes everything up. It will hamstring everything that's happening. Yeah.
There's enough trust that everyone can commit once the decision is made.
If one disagreement is going to make you write someone off forever, you're going to live in a very, very small circle, and it's going to be a bubble. People only agree with you 100%. And let me just tell you, you're not going to get better games out of that little bubble.
And look,
well said, Tim Cain. Well said. I do think there is value in learning how to have better productive debate over time, especially as you become more senior, figuring out how to be like, oh man, I'm really rough around the edges. Can I adjust that so that I can get more pros out of the relationships and the way I show up in conversation without as many of the cons? Because when you do become senior, if you are highly aggressive, especially as organizations are larger, the hierarchy plays a role in someone's ability to push back against you. So if you're like a senior director or the VP or the whatever, like you're the game director or something, the head of studio, the EP, you being volatile, even if you're like, yeah, everybody, we're just supposed to all bring our ideas, and I'm just setting that example. The problem is there is a reality of hierarchy between. Now, in a small team, you don't have as much of that. In a large team, that's very dangerous, and you got to be careful with that. But to his point, if a disagreement with somebody, if somebody holding a different opinion than you hold means that, like, well, that's it, can't listen to you anymore because you believe the wrong thing about blah, like, you're going to have an ever narrower group of people that are all, in the end, more likely just trying to make sure they don't offend anybody else in the group. Because once you get down to that place, it's really easy to like screw up and get kicked out. And so, like, honesty almost gets whittled out of your life in some ways, even from yourself, as you need to adhere to whatever is in that dynamic of the group. Like, you just need to go along with whatever said so that you don't get rejected. And that is internally dishonest. And you started by taking away everybody else's honesty as whatever they would tell you that you didn't want to hear. But anyway, yeah.
And let me just tell you, you're not going to get better games out of that little bubble.
Damn.
And look, the industry doesn't need more polish and politeness. It needs more heat.
And people over, it's not that you have to be mean, but I think I've seen when I was working at Google, sometimes people were actually too nice to the point that they didn't want to step on somebody's toes. So they didn't want to give direct criticism. And then that made the product suffer a lot. And we made decisions where we really didn't care. We cared more about how like we as the engineers felt than what the actual users felt.
What's interesting to us are people who, yes, are flawed, but who care deeply about each other. And conflicts arise because they have different perspectives on what needs to be done.
I'm sorry about Aria.
We need more teams that are brave enough to protect their soul and to stay true to themselves. Teams like Team Cherry. We need people like we had in the early days, where the game reflected the trust, the delicate balance. You could feel the soul of the team when you played the game. And friction? That wasn't a problem. That was fuel. But it's hard. It's hard work. It means being willing to wrestle with ideas and set aside egos, and it means facing hard realities together. But we've seen it work before, and we're seeing it work now. And I think we can reclaim that soul.
I'm going to have to start.
Yeah, great video. I like, as she said, we've seen it before. We've also seen it now. I think there's a myth that like this is how it used to be. I think that's how it used to be for some, and many of those became successful partially as a result of their willingness to have the hard conversations, challenge each other, still respect each other, still trust each other, not have like a knockdown drag out at the office about something that you thought was really important. And then someone makes a call and you go, okay. And it wasn't the call that I wanted, but someone made a call and now I'm behind it and I'm supporting that wherever it goes. I'm not going to hold the bitterness because again, that implies that I'm the ego investment and things like that. So like we have teams that are doing this today. And I think more of them now do come from the non-giant corporate spaces. Some still can exist inside of those corporate spaces, but it's perhaps higher challenge there because you do have things like reduction in stakes and more concerned that if I say the wrong thing, I might get in trouble and that sort of like there's a bunch of stuff that comes along with the corporate side. And I think this is where as leaders, we have a unique role to play in the maintenance of the culture, in knowing when you need to get out of the room so that people can have a conversation, when you need to be present and make sure that there is a conversation happening, to encourage the disagreement, to not stamp out anything that feels tense or any disagreement or anytime somebody says something that might be perceived as harsh. Again, there's a misinterpretation of psychological safety that is one where we can't have the real conversation because it might offend somebody. And if someone gets offended, so instead we run down a path of toxic positivity. And everybody just, high-fiving each other when the game's not getting better. And I think we have to take that seriously as leaders in games. We establish the norms here. You do have to be aware of the hierarchy. If one exists, if you have a multi-tiered hierarchy, if you're in one of those larger organizations, you have to be aware of the fact that a CEO can come in and try to have a heated debate with a bunch of people, but they probably won't get as much raw honesty out of that team as they might even want, as the culture they're trying to create. In fact, it might squish out what would have happened had they not been there. I've seen that happen too, where a very senior person shows up and it's like, oh, cool, they're showing up to participate, but it makes everybody a little more cautious. And you could say, well, they shouldn't do that. Ideally, they wouldn't do that. Well, but it's hierarchy. And we respond to hierarchy in a particular way as humans, and we have to acknowledge that. And again, perhaps the advantage of some of the smaller, 5 to 10, 15 person groups out there where there's just not as much hierarchy and there is more of everybody has time to build a meaningful relationship with everybody else in the context of work. That's not true if you're 100 50 people, 200 people. Not everybody's going to know the CEO. And so if like the CEO shows up to your meeting, it's going to change the shape of that meeting, change the tone of that meeting. So you have to be aware of all these things and simultaneously remember that the goal is we are here to create something amazing. We are here to create something meaningful for our players. We are here to do something that matters, to achieve this vision together. And the best way for us to do it is to be willing to have hard conversations with each other, to not get offended if somebody says something that doesn't sound right or, that we could take personally, to go like, okay, I can forgive you for the insult you just threw at me or that I perceived you threw at me because I know you are trying to go to the right place. And then I would also say there are people that are such toxic jerks that no matter how skilled they are, I don't want them on my team. And all the literature supports that too. You want the team that can have the hard debate and get into the conversation. But if you've got somebody who, ego again, arrogance often present in the toxic jerk archetype, no matter how skilled they are, they take more than they give because it isn't about the game. It's about them, often. And that's one of the things that makes them toxic jerks. It's like, well, I'm so good at what I do, you can't not have me here, but that means I can get away with whatever I want because I'm such a big deal and I'm so important. And like that's not a healthy archetype ever. So it's again, there's all these like, you're trying to stay in the right spot and keep your team there, keep your culture there, keep the right conversations happening. It is hard. But trust, relationships, healthy debate, the disagreements, standing in the storm rather than having to still the storm as a facilitator. These are things that are going to be important. And setting an example of this in how you show up, in the things you encourage, the things you discourage as a leader, like you can make a huge difference here. Even in those big companies, I think you can. It doesn't have to all go back to 5-person teams trying to make little great games. Happy for have lots of people doing that, and there are lots of people doing that, and some of them are doing a great job with it. But like I think you could also bring this attitude back into larger corporations bit by bit, or at least in the sphere that you have influence over. And I think we should try. I think our teams would be better off, or our games would be better off. The players would be better off for it. So, yeah, I'm going to watch what she had at the end here real quick.
Party today, here, now. Come, dragon, I will fight you. Sancho Panza, my sword. For truth. For beauty. For art. Charge! Charge!
Actually, I hadn't seen that before. Okay, yeah, great video by Laura. In terms of, I think, pointing out something really, I wish she'd actually spent more time on her role as leader. How did she actually do that? How did she encourage that? She's talked about that in some other videos as well. And I think she actually did this really well. And so there's a lot of advice she could probably give around recreating this instead of just calling back to like, oh, I wish it was like this, or like, this is what you sold. But like, she actually knows how to do this stuff really well from what I can tell. So anyway, yeah, if you got anything out of this, hit subscribe and appreciate you. Cheers.